Got this piece completely cut out of here. Got my holes ready for the plug welds. When I go back in with the other piece, I'll weld it from through the rebar here. At the bottom, just cut this off with the file belt and just chiseled that piece off instead of trying to drill from the bottom. If I drill through the bottom, I'll have to weld up the hole from the bottom, and it's better to do a vertical down weld than try to do it from underneath the car. So I'll reach under here and do those plug welds. Should be able to get to that no problem. And then just weld the rebar from the outside to that panel. This piece is going to come out eventually. I've got to separate this side of the headlight pocket from the radiator support, so we're going to try to save this part. I need to unbolt this and drill the spot welds off of this piece to get it off of there. And then this part will be finished. I need to go along the frame rail right here and clean this seam sealer out so I can see all those welds. And I will do a wash under here before I get ready to put everything in and get the mud out of here. But for right now, I'm just going to get all the pieces out, and that way I can clean it one time. And once I get that flange off, from here up will be pretty much prepped. So get that off in this piece. Then I'll work my way back and start back here. Okay, we've got everything out of the way, down to taking this piece right here off that runs behind this piece. So I've got to cut probably this much off of this piece right here, because the shock tower is down in here along the frame. So this section of this piece right here has got to come off so I can access the welds on the frame. And once I get that off of there, I'm going to take some of the welds off here to free this piece up. I'm going to flatten this back out and get it straight, at least probably 90% of the way there. And then I'm going to cut probably right through here just to take this section out. And what I might do is drill myself a hole somewhere. I don't want to go through this hole because the grommet's got to fit in that, but go maybe right through here with the air body saw, and I'll put this piece back in. This will give me some access underneath here to be able to weld the shock tower to the frame. And then I'll put that piece in at the end and just seam weld it back through here and just finish it off, and it won't show. And I'll be able to cavity wax all in here before I put this piece on. And once I get this piece on and weld it in, I'll be able to cavity wax this entire thing again. But I want to make sure that I've got cavity wax in here before I close this area up, and I don't know that I can get the wand in there later on. I'll go through this hole here to get the frame all the way back into here. And if I can, I'll go through maybe this hole if I can't reach from the front, and bring the wand through here, make sure I get the frame really good inside and in here. And then do it again once everything's together. But that'll have to be done after paint. I'm gonna go ahead and get this cut off back here and make me a mark where I need to do it, and try not to go any further than I have to, because it actually folds under and goes underneath the car back on the frame here, and it's really hard to get to. So I try to stay where I can see where I'm gonna cut. I only go about 3 inches back, and once that's off, I'll straighten and cut that, and then it'll allow me to get this out. Okay, I've got this piece off back here that overlaps the shock tower. Came off back there. I'm trying to not go any further back than I have to. It steps down under here, and I don't want to have to weld under there, so I'm stopping it here where I can still get to it. Got a little bit of a spot weld there left to grind off, and a MIG weld here. But I'm gonna come through here and I'm gonna cut. I've got this marked. I'm gonna cut this off right here. That way I'm going to the right of this recess and to the left of this hole. I'm just gonna have a straight, flat surface to have to weld back and finish out later. If I come on this side of this hole, it's really not enough room in here to work, and I've got to cut it anyway, so I might as well give myself more room and come out here where it's still flat, and I can weld this back up. Even though it's a longer weld, I'll have a lot more room to work, and I'll be able to just grind this smooth and just wipe it here, and it's not going to be but maybe 3 or 4 inches longer than if I cut it here, and I'll have a whole lot more room to work. So I'm going to cut it right here with from this direction. I'm going to take the body saw and cut so that the cut is really thin, and once I get here, I'll take the saw and I'll just, I may even take the cutoff wheel at that point and just cut up through here just to make me a cut in this piece, and I can break it off there at a nice clean edge. All right, I test fit the part in there, but I wasn't able to get it hooked underneath this side right here. I had it on top. It's got to go under this piece. So what I'm doing now is to give myself some clearance. Most of the overlap is right in here. I've already cut off that front triangular section. So what I did here is I clamped a piece of angle iron to this piece so that it would fold in a straight line, and I've just folded it up. I'm just pushing all these clamps at once to get it to come up, and hopefully I can get this piece hooked in underneath it, and then I'll pull this back down and I can hammer and dolly it from underneath. I've already straightened it with hammer and dolly, but it's in the way, so I'm folding it up, make some clearance. I can't go in with the assembly straight sideways because it has to go behind here, and actually between this piece and this piece. It's got to go in there between those, and I can't push it on that direction because the piece that goes over the frame this way is hung up on this going this way, and I can't take the whole assembly and push it in from the front because the rebar's in the way. So the rebar was off, which I think this was probably one of the last things put on in the factory. If it was off out of the way, I could just take the whole assembly and push it from the front to the back, and it would go right on exactly where it needs to go. But I'm just going to make enough clearance back here where I don't have to cut anything else off the car. And if I can get it worked up under here, then I can drop it down in the front like the first time I fit it. So I'm going to go ahead and bend this up just a little bit further and try to fit it one more time. Okay, that did the trick. I was just able to get it in there. Got that folded up. I had to knock this up just a little bit. I could shave a little bit off the back corner of this piece right here. I could shave some of that off if I need to. There's plenty of flange there, but I don't want to do that if I don't have to. When I knocked this corner up a little, it buckled this again. But once I have this in here, I can just hammer all that back out. I needed to get it inside this piece here. That's the piece I'm leaving on the car. It comes up under here, and this piece slides between it and the A-pillar post right here. So I actually had to lift it up. It was catching on this fillet weld, knocked it up a little bit, and it slid right in. So that's about where it was to begin with, because that's where the seam sealer right back here stops. You can see where the seam sealer stops, and that's where the original piece was. So I'm right in the same place, I believe. I may need to adjust up and down just a little bit. This might need to be flush with this piece, or either flush with that. I need to look at the other side, see where it sits. But the main thing is getting the fender and the hood to fit no matter what. So got it clamped in place. I pulled this back just a hair so it can give me a little more room to get it in. And once I have it in there, I'm going to knock this piece a little bit further towards the engine. Knock it back where it was. It looked like it was bent in just a little bit because this rib wasn't straight, it was slightly arced. So I've pulled it out a little bit more than necessary just to be able to get this thing in there, and I'll go back in about 1/8 of an inch with it. This is really the hold up here. I'm trying to not have to cut this off, but this rebar is what's mostly in the way. I've barely got it in there though. I need to get a clamp. I've ordered a big box clamp that I've been needing anyway, and I'll go around the frame and reach in and get this thing held down where it needs to be. It's movable, but I need to pull it forward so that this piece right here, as I pull that back there rocks down where it needs to go, and I'll be able to get a clamp back in there once I get that in place. But for right now, I think we're good. I'm going to go ahead and try to probably pull it back out and prep some of the flanges so when I put it back in the next time, it can stay if everything fits. But I'll need to get the hood and the fender from the customer and the hinge. I'm going to try to get the front end, oh, and also the headlights. I need to get the whole front end to fit, and then I can weld it in. All right, got the hood hinge in. Customer came by and helped me fit the hood. Everything looks good. I think we can make whatever minor adjustments we need to once it's completely welded and put together. I'm going to go through now. I'm going to pull it out, get all my holes punched like down in here that where I need holes, and right along here I need some holes. And we'll go ahead and punch this while I have all this out of the way and get to it. There's a couple here that need to be punched, and the rest of them are just where I drilled through to get it off the donor, so I've already got holes there. I've got them all marked. Just going to clean all the flanges, get them down to bare metal, and get it back in there. I've got lines scribed around this piece where this needs to go. I've scribed both sides of the strut tower on the frame, so I know where to center it back up to. And the rest of it's just going to be pulled into the frame in the front and up to the rebar, so that'll align itself. I'm going to get it off and get it prepped, and hopefully go back in with it one more time and start welding. Alright, I've got all the flanges ready to go. Once I get it back in, it should be able to stay in. All down in here, I've got everything ground just continuously so that I can make sure I don't get any charred paint in between the parts. You want to make sure that you always have bare metal around about an inch around where the weld's going to be. So I've got about a 1-inch radius around it there, and there were, I think, 2 welds here, so I've got an inch this way and above and all the way around. And then where you've got 2 or 3 together, you might as well just grind the whole area. Now you can use weld through primer over this, but what I do is I like to have bare clean steel that welds really well, and then I come back and I will put in epoxy in all these joints to flood the flange area between the two and just encapsulate everything with epoxy. So it's a lot better to me to do that than to have to come back and clean the weld through primer out of that hole that you're going to weld, and it still doesn't weld all that well. So I've got that flange completely ground. Inside here I've gone about an inch around every hole. Now you can't in here really without going into this piece, so I'm just going to stop there. But up there I've got it all ground off. Same thing on the outside, just around the hole. You don't have to go as far where you're actually going to weld, because it'll burn the paint off, and you can come back and scuff this off. But when you got paint in between the panels that you can't go back and get once you burn it, you're stuck with charred paint in there that you can't really coat with cavity wax or anything. It's just going to sit on top of that, so it could flake off later. I mean, a rust issue. So that's why this is continuously ground all the way across, since those welds are so close together. The 1-inch radius around each one will just overlap, so I just ground the whole thing off. Same with the top here, all across here. And down here this is bare. Up here this is bare from just cleaning it to get the other piece off. Same thing on the part. I've got these holes punched. I've got this whole area ground. Sandblasted all this so I don't have to take any more material off. I've got these ground around the holes. This whole flange here that's going to get covered up later, I just ground the whole thing so that I don't have to worry about where the holes are going to be, because once the other piece is on top of it, I can't go back under there and grind it easily. Same thing here, ground the whole piece all the way around. And on the other side as well, it's just ground all the way down so I don't get any charred paint in between the 2 flanges. We got this part here. That's where I'm going to weld to the frame. Get it ground, the back prepped. And this back here was rusty, so I've sandblasted that. And that's going to go on top of the place on the rebar over there that I've already sanded. I mean, already ground, like right in there on the rebar. So I'll weld from the top here, and right there, that's going to go to the rebar, and that's going to go down to the bottom of the rebar in the front. These areas in here, I sandblasted inside here so I could take some of the paint off, since I couldn't get the grinder in there. So everywhere that's going to have a mating flange together is going to be ground to bare steel. And I come back after I weld it and finish all the welds, I'll let it cool down, then I'll pour epoxy in all these joints. I've got to add a ground bracket here. I'll do that later. I was going to do it before it goes in the car, but I'm going to go ahead and get it in the car just to have it out of the way. And I'll put that on when I get everything welded in place. Once it's welded and I put the epoxy in, I'm going to have to let it sit for probably a couple days, make sure that epoxy dries completely. And then I can go back through and clean this up and and seam seal everything and have it ready for paint. Okay, I'm about to start welding. I'm going to start in the back here so I can lock this in, and then I can finish up, moving those clamps up to the front. I've got a few up here, but I need some of those long ones up here to hold the front in place to weld it. So I've got what I need back here in the back set up. I'm going to try to get in here, do one or two of these, and then I'm going to do a couple down here. I'm going to go between these two clamps first and maybe move them down, but these won't actually reach in there, so I'm going to have to use a longer clamp. This is the longest one I've got. I got one more coming that I've been needing anyway. I'll do a few down in here just to hold all this in place, and then I can start moving clamps around and get it completely welded in. I'm going to start welding, and I'll be back when I've got it done. All right, I've got 90% of it welded in. I've got the fender hanging on it just to check the fitment of the hood again. Everything along the frame is done. I've got the rebar welded into it all along the bottom here, up on the frame rail where there's just some stitch welds to hold it down. I've got a couple in there on this trail. I got 3 now done. I'm waiting on this, waiting to get this piece up here in before I finish welding all this in case I need to move it around some. Let's weld it up the side back there that you can't see. I've got the headlights in. I've measured I measured the distance off right here to the rebar. Measured that distance. It was about, I think, a little over 9 centimeters from back there to here, and I set this piece right here at the same distance off the rebar, so it should be right. I've got it clamped back here, holding it down. See that vice grip? That's really all I've got left to weld as far as what I need to align, and then I've got to just weld the tie bar pieces together right in here. There's 5 or 6 welds. There's 2 or 3 in the front and 3 or 4 in the back. Once I know the hood comes down even on the headlights, nothing needs to be adjusted, I'll go back here and weld this once I pull the headlight back out. But I don't want to weld it just yet until I know I've got it right. So that's where we are. We just got to get the hood back on one more time, check everything. Everything looks good. I'll probably leave the hood on, but just pull it up, get the headlight back out, weld this up, weld a few of these while this tie bar is in here. Then I can pull the tie bar back out and weld behind it and the ones that are behind the tie bar right here once I know it won't move. I'll be back once I've got it all fitted and show you how everything fits together before I weld it in. Okay, we're all welded in. Just finished up these in here and all these around the tie bar area. I had the tie bar and all bolted in. There's a big X brace in the front that bolted right in, fit nice. So I welded what I could get to keep this in position, then I took all that back out and went around in here where the tie bar bolts. Got all those welded. There's a stress crack right here. I just finished that. And it's got everything welded now. So I'm going to go through now and start grinding down the welded areas. I've still got to put this piece right here in, but I'm going to do it later since all my welds are starting to rust. It's been so humid here the past few days that just it sitting overnight has started some rust, especially where I sandblasted it. That seems to be the worst areas for flash rust like that. So I'm going to go ahead and clean all these up. May have to go back and re-blast this area just so I can get all of it in there, or get it out that's in there. I'm going to start grinding the welds a little bit, all these, and inject some epoxy into these flanges, and then just use a wool dauber to coat the outside. I'm going to give it 2 good coats, and then I'll come back and do the same thing when I get that piece welded underneath. And I've also got to add the ground bracket in here, and I think that's it. So I'll have to do, well, there's a bracket here for the fender, but I'll do another round of epoxy injection and coating whenever I get to that point. But I got to get these covered up because they're starting to rust. I'm going to go get the epoxy mixed up, so by the time it is all ground and ready to go, I can put the epoxy in. It's got to sit for a 30-minute induction time after it's mixed. Okay, ready to epoxy all these joints. I've still got this piece under here to weld in and the fender bracket, but I'm going to go ahead and do what I've got done now that the welds are starting to rust. I've got them all cleaned up. Just ground all of them down that are going to be visible, and I'm just going to coat them with epoxy right now. So I'll put some body filler glaze over the ones that are visible later, but I got to get them coated. I've got some rags stuck in here to catch all the drips. I'm going to inject some as much as I can into the back of this joint, let it run through behind here. I'm going to run some down through this joint right here and let it run out underneath here. So I got to put some plastic on the floor to catch it all. I'll be putting some through these joints and in this direction so it can run underneath. I'm going to flood back behind here. It'll come out the bottom. Same thing here, just go down inside the rail, let it run through, which is this joint. It'll come out onto paper here. Anything that gets on any of the rest of the car, I can just wipe off with thinner. I'm going to give it about an hour to set up. I'll probably eat lunch while it's setting up and come back and pull all the paper, and that way I can get all the excess off the body. I'm going to go down through here as well. Since I can't do that from the other side, I'm going to inject it through here, let it run through the frame. And same thing back in here. I'm just going to inject it in the top of that seam, let it run through. And out of the outside here. And I'll do everything else with wool dauber. There's no reason to have to spray it. I'll just wipe it on all the exposed welds. And then I'll come back after probably 20-30 minutes and recoat all these. Like I said, I'll give it like a full hour or two to fully dry, and then I'll pull all the paper off so I'll know it will stop dripping after that. Okay, I've got the plastic out, I've got my epoxy mixed up, I've got the syringe full. Now I'm going to take this, just inject it in this seam. I'm going to do it slowly so I don't just overshoot like I just did right there. Got to give it time to work itself in. This is just to get in between the flanges. I'll come back with the wool dauber and actually brush it on where it needs to go, like right up here where there's bare metal and any of the exposed welds and stuff. This is just to get in the flanges. It should be running out on the outside of the frame by now. I'll go under there and look in a second and show you what it looks like. Alright, see, it's going through there. I need to make sure I get it through all the way through this joint here from the top. It'll slowly creep its way through. I can see it starting to come through now, but you can probably tell right in there it's starting to come through. So I'm going to do this around all these flanges, like up in here. And some of these, if they're mostly horizontal, you just have to force it in and you just get some speed on it. Make it go in there, and then I'll come back and wipe all this off. This will mimic the factory e-coat bath as much as possible and try to get some paint down in there, and then once this stuff dries, it'll basically seal off the joint, and I'll come back and seam seal it when I get done and let this cure. First round of epoxy's done. And what's nice about putting this on with a dauber is you can actually work it into some of these grooves and pits that you can't get in with a spray gun. And back in here, it's difficult to get a spray gun in here anyway. So I've got 2 coats of epoxy on all this. I'm going to come back and take off the epoxy where I need to weld in here, but I went ahead and coated it so it won't be rusting. Put it all down in here. And I've injected it. I think you saw me inject it in all the flanges. It all down in here, down there, bottom, headlight pocket right here, all underneath, inside here, And I've also got back behind the back of this flange here where it burned a little of the finish. And when I go to cavity wax the rail, I'll wait till this fully cures, and I'll cavity wax the frame rail through here as far as my wand will go, and then I'll probably put the wand in. I'll even extend the wand here all the way back, because I'll need to go back into here for when I weld this piece on. I'll need to cavity wax all the way back to here. I think that long wand I have may reach that, but if not, I'll come through either this hole and come up, or from this hole and go back. So I got to get this area too. I'll have to come this way to get this spot. And for now, everything's coated that's welded, so I'm gonna let that cure. While that's cured, I'm gonna cut this brace off here. This wasn't available. We thought we could buy this, but we're gonna have to save it. So I got to cut this section off of this frame rail. Got to get this frame rail off, and then a few flanges here that were welded to it. So I'm gonna work on that while that epoxy's drying. And that way I can get this done. Get it on the car by the time that epoxy's dry. All right, a quick update on the Mercedes. I've got the apron fully welded. I think I may have shown you that. Everything's epoxy primed. I've got this extension piece welded back in. I ground the weld across here smooth. I've epoxied all that. Flooded it through that flange there. And that's the weld across. I did it across the top. And I did this piece first so that I could access this back here to coat it with epoxy before I put this lower brace underneath on the frame. I'm gonna do that last. That'll give me access to all this area in here until the very end. So I've got this clamped. I'm gonna start at this end right here where I've got this hole and work my way out and make this match up to the apron. That way I know this is in the place it started. And I'll weld that up solid to where it can't move, and I'll work this way with the welder. I've got two little small clamps on the hole there, keeping the sheet metal flush, and I've got about a blade width gap in there so that I put it back where it was. So I took the blade that I was using, or one like it, and I've got a blade. I've got about a blade width there. It's not exact, but I can get it in there. So that's where the piece was. I've got the hole perfectly round behind those clamps. You can't see the joints, but it is. So I'm gonna go ahead and just zip that up with a welder and have that done, and then I'll come this way. Okay, all the welding's done. I've got epoxy over all the exposed welds. I've got a little bit of body filler and glaze in a couple of visible places. I just did the fender bracket, so all this back here is the most recent weld I've done. I haven't coated it just because I can paint straight over it with easy coat, and it's direct to metal, so I don't need any epoxy there. The rest of it's mainly there just to keep it from rusting while I weld the rest of the parts. So now that I'm here, I don't need to worry about doing that. And I'm going to seam seal after I get the easy coat on. I'm going to seam seal all the way around this thing to encapsulate all these welds, so they'll be fine. I'm going through right now just cleaning with water-based wax and grease remover just to kind of get everything off that's under here. A lot of it I've already wiped off just to be able to weld it, but get it nice and clean, then I'll go back with the solvent base. And I'm going to scuff everything that's going to get paint on it. That way the seam sealer will stick, and then while it's still fresh I can just paint everything. It'll stick to the seam sealer and it'll stick to where I sanded. So that's going to be pretty much both sides, top and bottom, but I'm going to start seam sealing up here at the top. That way everything inside here, if I run out of seam sealer, at least everything under here is done, and then we can go ahead and paint or something in here and get everything put back together. And I can always put a little more seam sealer and paint out here once the car is drivable again. I want to at least get the top done. I test fit the fender. I'm gonna have to slot the holes in the fender just maybe a 1/16 of an inch on the back end of the slot. I put this back where it was on this part so that I would know that it was in the right position, at least on the apron, and I'm just adjusting from there. So I'm gonna go ahead and just scuff everything after I clean it, and then I'll be back to the seam sealer and just get started on that. Okay, I'm just about ready to paint this. I've got to do a little more masking right in here and put some rocker guard underneath to match this thick sprayed on texture here. Probably won't match it perfectly, but I'll add some over into it to just continue on over it So I've got easy coat everywhere. I had primer and seam sealer just to kind of get the color close. Wasn't really necessary, but over here I covered this whole area just because that's doesn't get any paint. So that looks mostly original there. Got the spring back in. I'm gonna get the rocker guard out and coat underneath here, just in the wheel well, and let that dry. I think it needs about 30 minutes to an hour, and then I can put the base coat over it. And I'll do the same. I'll start the base coat up here just while I'm waiting on the bottom to flash for the rocker guard. So then I'll put the base coat here underneath, and then I'll clear. I'm actually going to do this top rail with this so that this matches. This came off the donor. I'm going to go over to the edge. So this will get clear coated across the top only. It's ready for base coat. Got rocker guard out here on the bumper where it was. Underneath, just blended it in. Got some on the back side here where I had to do some drilling. I had to add these 3 holes right here for a alarm. I think it's a speaker. And with the inside ready, got some easy coat over all the bare metal. It's easier to get an aerosol can in there, so I went ahead and put that over the seam sealer so that it covers it. Anywhere I don't get good coverage with the spray gun, with the silver, won't be so obvious. I'm going to extend over here with the clear, or with the base coat, and then I'll just clear the tie bar and the headlight, top of the headlight bucket when I get to that point. But I'm going to go ahead and get silver over all of it. Okay, I've got full coverage in here. Looks pretty good. I'm just going to let this dry for about 10 more minutes so I can put some clear across the top. And this is Metalux base coat, if you're wondering. I normally use Chroma base, but inside here, Metalux is perfectly fine. It would be okay on the outside too, since we're going to do this as an overall eventually, but I'll probably put Chroma base on it. Now there was a little bit of clear. I'm going to pull this back, maybe blend some clear into on top of the bumper, because there was a little bit there. Not that it'll be seen or anything, but the top definitely will be, so I got to clear it for sure. If I have a little bit left, I'm going to put it over here. Alright guys, I've got everything fitted. I'm not sure if I've shown you this yet, but I've got all the gaps set at the 5mm spec. Everything's lining up. Customer decided to pick up a used door that he found a good deal on, so we're going to replace this door. This body line here is caved in about 1/4 inch, so we're just going to do a swap on it. It's repairable, but it will take longer to do that and probably cost more than just cleaning up and painting the jamb on this door and swapping it out, since the outside had to be painted anyway. So I'm just going to finish cleaning this up. I've also got a fuel door here. There was some rust in the spot welds on the original, so I'm going to jam this out with the door, these 2 pieces, and we'll get those on the car so that the outside surfaces can be painted with the outside of the car later.